listener production.
Hello, welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Imagine you're pregnant, you're getting an ultrasound, and you get told you're having not one baby, not two, but three. What runs through your head? Finances, housing, schooling? Well, for 4,000 Aussie couples every year, this is exactly what happens. But did you know Australia lags behind other OECD countries when it comes to supporting families with multiples?
There's this common misconception with people who don't have multiples that twins, for example, they just cost twice as much. You've got two, they cost twice as much. But our report found that they actually cost more, up to 5 times more than having a singleton, and having triplets costs up to 13 times more than having a singleton.
In this episode of The Briefing, Bension Siebert speaks with mother of triplets, Silje Andersen-Cooke, who is also the director of the Australian Multiple Birth Association, to find out why families with multiples are so overlooked in Australia. First though, Antoinette Lattouf is here for the headlines. It is Wednesday, the 20th of March.
Hey Sasha, g'day everyone. 2023 has broken every single climate indicator record. That's according to the UN's climate agency.
Fossil fuel pollution is sending climate chaos off the charts. Sirens are blaring across all major indicators. Last year saw record heat, record sea levels, and record ocean surface temperatures. Glaciers likely lost more ice than ever before.
A very alarmed and concerned sounding UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres there. So the annual State of the Climate report has been released, and it revealed that we saw record heat, the hottest oceans, highest sea levels and lowest Antarctic sea ice levels since records began. And every continent experienced extreme climate conditions, while droughts, floods, cyclones and fires affected millions of people.
Another concern was greenhouse gases, which also hit record highs and thus spurred on last year's hot temperatures. There is a glimmer of hope, though. We do like to find it where we can. The report found a 50% increase in renewables compared to the year before. But of course, calls remain for more to be done, Antoinette.
And I guess this is another part where we could say is a glimmer of hope. Worldwide, 77 countries broke temperature records. That's not the glimmer of hope bit. But Australia was not one of them. So our annual average temperature was 0.53 degrees below the horror year, which was 2019, and temperatures in the seas around us were below the records of 2022. So marginally good news specifically for us.
Yeah, it just feels like it's like a 1-year reprieve, and next year it's going to smash us even more. It feels inevitable. But I know here in Sydney, we didn't have any heat waves, but there were heat waves in Perth and also in Adelaide and Melbourne. Even Tasmania broke its record for the hottest night ever, which was set back in 1912. So, maybe a reprieve last year, but it feels like it'll still keep coming for us. Donald Trump has drawn strong criticism from the White House after his comments about Jewish voters. In a podcast, the former US president was asked what he thought of comments made by US Congressman Chuck Schumer, which criticised Benjamin Netanyahu. He had this to say.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion, they hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
In a statement, the White House's spokesman, Andrew Bates, said Trump's comments were vile and unhinged, further labelling them anti-Semitic.
Yeah, they do sound pretty vile and unhinged. And I guess it's just a taste of what's to come now that he is the Republican candidate and we're going to be hearing a lot more from him. But sticking with Gaza and Israel, we've also heard from the White House in relation to reports of imminent famine in Gaza, calling on Israel to do more to allow vital aid into the Strip. So just for context, it's been described as catastrophic levels of hunger in Gaza, and that's according to a number of human rights and aid organisations. More than 1 million people are at risk of famine. That's according to Oxfam, and that's because Israeli authorities are blocking relief deliveries. So I guess it's really important to point out that this is man-made starvation. It's not due to poverty. It's not due to a lack of natural resources or inability to grow and distribute food. It's because it is deliberate and it is avoidable, but it is being blocked by Israel. The United States has been airdropping food and other aid into the enclave. Joe Biden announced earlier this month that the US military would build a floating pier to allow deliveries by sea, which I find, a strange move given that, they've been airdropping aid but also providing the bombs that are dropped on Gaza. So it's this really strange gaslighting where it's like, we're here to help, but we're not really. Martin Griffiths, the UN Top Relief Coordinator on X, said that the international community should hang its head in shame for failing to stop this man-made famine.
The Reserve Bank has kept rates on hold at 4.35%. The good news for mortgage holders is that an explicit mention of a rate hike was not included in the official statement. So last month, the RBA said in its decision a further increase in interest rates cannot be ruled out. But yesterday's statement said the board is not ruling anything in or out. So definitely a softening of language on rate hikes.
And the central bank noted that inflation continues to moderate but remains high. And most economists believe we'll see a rate cut by the end of the year. And Sasha, I came off my fixed rate home loan last month, and I cannot tell you how daunting and terrifying it is and how huge the jump is in my mortgage repayment. And I reckon I fit squarely under that mortgage stress umbrella. And that is when you have to spend 30% or more of your household's pre-income tax to pay mortgage. And the latest Roy Morgan data shows 1,609,000 mortgage holders are at risk of mortgage stress. And that is a significant increase from December.
It'll be interesting to see jobs data is being released tomorrow, which could also be an indication if the unemployment rate grows. That could present an opportunity for the RBA to potentially look to drop rates in the future. I've read a few different predictions from economists, some saying, we could be seeing a drop in the middle of the year. It might not come till November. It might not come till next year. So it kind of feels like the weather. People are predicting things, but we won't know until it happens. And the Princess of Wales rumours have seemed to die down a little bit over the last 24 hours after a video emerged of her visiting a farm shop in Windsor. TMZ and The Sun obtained the footage showing Kate walking with Prince William, alive and apparently well, in spite of the incessant internet theories. But she is facing more backlash with another photo she took coming under the microscope and being called out for manipulation.
So this is a picture of the late Queen Elizabeth surrounded by her grandchildren that was released in April last year to mark the previous monarch's birthday, and it's riddled with Photoshop fails. Getty Images has now put a note on the photo saying it was digitally enhanced at the source. So we just need to uninstall the Canva and Photoshop apps on Kate's phone, I reckon, and everybody needs to calm down.
We talked about it last week when this was all blowing up. We did a video on it. It went viral. And, my thing was like, why are they manipulating these photos and da-da-da? And people are like, why do you care? The thing with royal photography is that it's recorded history. So this will be used to represent the history of the British monarchy in the future. And it's edited. And, royals editing things look back to royal portraits back in the day where, they were drawn or painted, I should say, to look thinner or more attractive, or their bodies weren't covered in scabies, which did happen, by the way.
Yeah, right. But they were all at least in the room, because this latest photo with the Queen makes it appear that not all children were in the room when it was taken.
Yes,
so somebody may have had soccer or had a tiff with somebody. They were like, he can't make it, he's got soccer training, so we're just going to add the photo in.
Yeah, look, I understand that people find royal rumours and conspiracy theories lame. I personally am really sad this is all over. I've quite enjoyed watching the internet sleuths go crazy for a week. Thanks so much, Antoinette, for being here for the headlines. Next up is Bension's deep dive into multiple births and why Australia is lagging behind when it comes to supporting those families.
Many of us have a vague idea in our minds that one day we might have kids. I don't know about you, but I've always been kind of 50-50 about it. At age 30, it's seeming less and less likely over time. Confession time now. Over the past several weeks, I've misplaced and regained my phone, my wallet, my keys, my headphones, and somehow, despite it being such a physically large object, my bike helmet. If nothing else, all of this seems absolute proof I can hardly manage to look after myself, let alone a whole new human being. And that's just thinking about one hypothetical child. Imagine finding out that you or your partner is not only about to have a child, but 3 children at once. Silje Andersen-Cooke and her partner were planning for a second child when they got the news they were having triplets. And she's here to tell us there's just not enough support available in Australia for parents in her rare situation. We don't hear it spoken about very often, but it turns out the impact of having twins, triplets, or even quadruplets is not just 2 or 3 or 4 times that of having one child. There are unique challenges of having multiple birth children that Silje says aren't being properly addressed. Silje, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. Tell us your story. What was it like when you found out you were having triplets?
Yeah, it was a crazy day finding out that I was having triplets. It's not something that anyone plans. So I already had an 18-month-old boy. We were just trying again for our second child. We went to have an ultrasound when I did the usual pregnancy at home test and found out that I was pregnant again. We were really excited and did the sort of 7-8 week ultrasound. And it was COVID times, actually. My partner was almost not going to be there. I'm so glad that he was there. And, yeah, the sonographer was scanning my belly and she was, like, so quiet. And I was really worried because anytime, the sonographer goes quiet, you're thinking the worst. And she was like, how did you guys conceive? And we were like, that is such an odd question to ask. We were like, I don't know, do you want to know the night that it happened or, weird small talk? We were like, the natural way. And she was like, okay, because this is what I can see. We're like, yeah. She was like, I've got 1 heartbeat here. Like, perfect. Another one here. And we're like, oh, my God, twins. And then she was like, and there's a 3rd one here. And I was like, oh, my God, please stop counting. Please tell me there's none. And she was like, and I'll just check to make sure there's no more. And I was like, both of us just absolutely shocked. And there's nothing that can prepare you for finding that out. And the thoughts that you have, this is just the scan. You basically just have the scan and then you get sent off on your merry way. They're like, here's your pictures. Yeah, there's nobody right outside the door explaining to you what it's going to be like, and you have so many questions in your head. You're so anxious, like, how is my body going to be able to hold 3 babies? I didn't even know, didn't even think about how that was a reality for me. How would that be possible? We're going to need to get a bigger car. We lived in a 2-bedroom house at the time in the inner west of Sydney. Like, we're going to need to move to a bigger house, and, what kind of pram do you use for triplets? Like, all these thoughts just running through my mind, and then slowly throughout the pregnancy kind of finding the answers as we could, leaning on a community.
How common are multiple births in Australia? Not just talking about one child and then another and then perhaps another, but having twins, triplets, quadruplets.
In Australia, multiple births form 1.4% of births total. We're talking like 4,200 births, multiple births in Australia every year. And of those, 98% of those births are twins. Only 2% are higher order multiples, so triplets, quadruplets or more. So in real numbers, the amount of triplets or more born every year in Australia is around like in the 50s, 52, 53, around that number. It's so rare. It really doesn't happen that often.
Are there specific medical issues for both mother and children in multiple births that apply specifically to multiple births?
There are specific pregnancy complications that can occur just in mothers who are pregnant with multiples, such as issues where, especially when like two twins are sharing a placenta, for example, more likely to have like restricted growth or things like that. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really speak to exactly how those symptoms work, but I know that throughout my pregnancy, every doctor was like, basically, you're more likely to experience all these different complications, basically every pregnancy complication. They were like, because you're pregnant with multiples, you are more likely to experience pretty much every single pregnancy complication that exists. It's just a really difficult time for any mum pregnant with multiples.
So you're the director of the Australian Multiple Birth Association, and your organisation put out research last year into how families with multiples are treated in Australia. Can you summarise what you found?
Basically, what the report found was that Australia is offering some of the lowest support out of when compared to 47 other countries in the OECD for multiple birth families. We found that in comparison, there were many other countries like Japan, Denmark, France, New Zealand, who provided more hands-on practical support, parental leave and financial support, and we don't have that in Australia.
So on a financial level, why is it that outside of the fact that you've just got more children, why is it important that the government recognise higher financial needs for multiple births?
I think there's this common misconception with people who don't have multiples that twins, for example, they just cost twice as much. You've got two, they cost twice as much. But our report found that they actually cost more, up to 5 times more than having a singleton. And having triplets costs up to 13 times more than having a singleton. So there isn't that recognition currently in Australian government policy of the immense financial burden that having multiples brings.
Can you explain why?
Yeah, the reason why is because firstly, during your pregnancy, you actually have more, because you've got a more complicated pregnancy, you're going to have more out-of-pocket medical costs. You're more likely to finish work sooner, which means you're foregoing, more of your income. You're more likely to take more leave post-birth. You're having to buy all this equipment up front for 2 or more babies. You're more likely to have to upgrade your house, your car. There's no hand-me-downs. We were going through 30 nappies a day. Just the cost of formula, for example, if you're using formula, we were going through a tin every 3 days. And that's really expensive. So there's just all these additional costs. It's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a quadruplet mum, and she was talking about how much rubbish, like the nappies are. For example, she had to upgrade her bin to a bigger bin and pay higher council rates for that. That is like another one of the costs on top of everything else that aren't really recognised at a policy level or really well understood by, I think, the Australian public. Like, we just have so much more. Childcare costs so much, especially if you have more than 2 kids going to childcare at the same time. It's such an immense, especially in the first 5 years, upfront cost for families.
What is the current support for families with multiple births?
So currently, if you are a parent of twins, you don't get any access to additional parental leave. If you have higher order multiples, there is a multiple birth allowance. It was actually established in the 80s by the Hawke government, and when the Hawke government established it in the 80s, and the Australian Multiple Birth Association actually helped get this over the line, it was a non-taxable, non-means-tested payment. Somewhere along the line during the Howard government, it actually turned into this, what it is today, which is a highly means-tested payment tied in with a family tax benefit A. And this is very niche, and I'm sure not many people know about this, but it's also called the multiple birth allowance, but twins are not eligible for it, which obviously doesn't really make sense because if you have twins, you've had a multiple birth, you've had 2 babies. So that's a really big sticking point. And then even if you have had higher order multiples, like we were going into debt and we weren't eligible for it. And, you know, we're talking about like less than 50 higher order multiple births a year, and not all of those people even qualify for this payment. So it's a payment that doesn't seem to be helping that many people and doesn't seem to be doing the job that it needs to be doing, which is really supporting higher order multiple families and also the broader multiple birth community.
And I suppose if it's only a very relatively small number of children each year, it wouldn't be a particularly high cost for the government to change it. What is your hope for the future on this level around the country? What are you looking for?
We really need to recognise the unique challenges that multiple birth families are going through. We released this report a year ago. Not much has changed since we did. We'd really like the government to look into this and really recognise these challenges. We want increased parental leave if you've had multiples. We need the multiple birth allowance to not be means tested and actually be accessible to everybody who has had a multiple birth. And yeah, we need to have in-home care and support. I mean, in New Zealand, if you have multiples, you get access to a certain number of hours of like a nanny or a mother's helper or someone caring for you in the home, similar to what they do for like aged care, for example. We actually need that support for multiple birth families. We know that if you're a parent of multiples, you're actually 5 times more likely to experience postnatal depression than if you were a parent of a singleton. And I understand completely why you would, because it is so hard. You are exhausted. You're 9 times more likely to experience disabling exhaustion, that is standing up and falling asleep. And where is the support? Where is the extra hands-on? Where's the extended sort of community? We need that extra in-home care to support these parents who are doing the best that they can.
Well, Silje, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Silje Andersen-Cooke there. That's it for this morning's briefing. Check your feed again at 3 p.m. for your next episode of The Briefing. And we're always keen to hear your feedback. Hit us up on Instagram, send us a DM at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Bension Siebert, and from all of us here at The Briefing, thanks for listening.
Listener.